The myth of the invincible Wehrmacht and the Red Army's steel fist. Let's set the record straight right away. There's a stubborn, poisonous myth that floats from bad movies to third-rate books. The myth that the German war machine in 1941 was a perfect, mirror-polished mechanism, armed with the best and most powerful weapons in the world. Well, that's a beautiful fairy tale for losers who wanted to justify their defeats with wonder weapons. Reality is much harsher, more paradoxical, and far more interesting. Put yourself in the shoes of a German infantry officer, an Oberleutnant, say, in the month of June 1941. You've been through Poland, France. You were taught that anti-tank defense is your 37mm gun, that workhorse which the soldiers among themselves had already dubbed the door knocker back in France. Why? Because its armor-piercing shell against the frontal armor of French Renaults or British Matildas often just went clink like a door knocker on an oak door. But in Europe, that was passable. There weren't so many tanks. The Allies' tactics were, to put it mildly, strange, and most machines had armor problems. And then you cross the border of the Soviet Union, and the world turns upside down. In front of you are not rare, neat tanks. In front of you is a steel avalanche. There are many of them, very many. And among the familiar light BT and T-26s, you see something monstrous. This is the T-34. Its frontal armor is 45 millimeters, but sloped at an intelligent, rational angle. That means the shell's path through the armor becomes longer, and the chance of a ricochet is higher. A simple 37mm lump from your gun just bounces off it, leaving a dent and a shower of sparks. And next to it comes the KV-1, heavy, clumsy, but with armor in some places up to 75 millimeters. This is no French tin can. This is a moving pillbox, and your crew looks at you with eyes full of terror. Their door knocker is useless. What do? You call for air support, artillery. But the tank is here now. It's crushing your positions. Its machine gun is chattering into the trenches. It seems like the end, but not so fast. The Germans wouldn't be Germans if they hadn't prepared a small, shiny, desperate crutch for just such an occasion. A crutch made of the most refractory metal on the planet. A crutch called a subcaliber projectile. Part 1. Industry, economy, and the great tungsten famine. To understand the price of this crutch, you need to look not at the manual, but at economic reports and resource maps. The Third Reich was a military colossus with feet of clay. Yes, they had brilliant organization, talented engineers, disciplined soldiers. But they were catastrophically short of strategic resources. Oil, rubber, non-ferrous metals, all were in short supply. And tungsten, the very stuff used for the cores of our magic shells, was one of the scarcest. Tungsten isn't just a metal. It's the foundation of the entire subcaliber shell concept. It's heavier, harder than steel. Perfect for that small arrow that such a shell fires. Imagine a regular shell. Now imagine that inside it is a rod, made not of iron, but of super dense tungsten, surrounded by a lightweight body sabot made of ordinary steel. When fired, this light shell flies with a mind-boggling initial velocity, close to 900 meters per second, compared to 500 or 600 for a regular armor-piercing shell. High speed means high energy. Upon impact, the fragile sabot body shatters, and that hard, dense core, like a nail, punches through the armor. But there are two huge problems. First, Germany had almost no tungsten of its own. It was bought from neutral countries, from Portugal, from Spain, at speculative prices for gold. Every kilogram of tungsten was accounted for. The second problem, the behind-armor effect of such a shell is negligible. It doesn't explode inside the tank. It's just a red-hot metal rod that bursts inside with a cloud of armor splinters. Yes, it can damage mechanisms, wound or kill the crew, start a fire from a punctured fuel tank. But it has no guaranteed high explosive or fragmentation effect. It's a weapon of desperation, a head-on weapon when there is no other way out. And so, in the summer of 1941, the German command makes a strategic choice. Yes, we are conserving tungsten. But right now, in the first weeks of the war, When our ability to stop the Soviet tank wedges determines the success of the entire blitzkrieg, we will spend this precious metal without looking back. We will arm our weak little 37mm guns with PZ.GR-40, these very subcaliber shells. This will give our infantry a chance. A small, mortally dangerous chance for the crew, but a chance. Part 2. The Summer Nightmare of 41. Small caliber versus the 34. So, back to the battlefield. The T-34 is moving on the positions. The crew of the 37mm Pak 35/36 feverishly loads the long, elegant PZ GR-40 shell. The commander screams, 200 meters! Wait, 200 meters. That's pistol shot range in tank combat. The T-34 is already firing from its powerful 76mm gun. Shells are bursting all around. Machine gun bursts are rattling against the gun shield. The men are strained, on the verge of breaking. Shot. Sharp. More ringing than a regular shell. And a hit. A neat hole appears in the front plate of the T-34's turret or hull. The core pierced the armor. What's inside? Maybe it killed the driver or the gunner. Maybe it jammed the turret. Or maybe it just went right through without hitting anything vital. The tank jolted, but keeps moving. Second shot. Third. The crew is working like madmen. And then, a miracle, the tank stops, smoke pours out of the hatches. The crew tries to bail out. They did it. At the cost of incredible nerve, at the risk of being crushed, the door knocker crew stopped the monster. But it didn't always go that way. More often, German reports noted something else. PZ.GR-40 shells ricochet off the sloped armor of the T-34. Penetration is only possible at a perfect angle, no more than 90 degrees. Effective range against the KV-1, no more than 100 meters. Imagine 100 meters. That's grenade range. That's practically suicide. Tactics were born ad hoc, on the battlefield in blood. The Germans understood. Taking on the T-34 head-on with its rounded shapes and slopes was a lost cause. You had to hit the side, the rear, the tracks. You had to create killing zones where several guns fired from different sides. The 37mm with subcaliber to the side while it was being aimed at the main threat. The 50mm Pak 38 to the front. Infantry throwing grenades, Molotov cocktails. This was no longer a duel. It was a hunt. And the subcaliber shell was the most expensive and precise cartridge in this hunt, save for the decisive shot. And you know what's most paradoxical? At the same time, on the other side of the front, Soviet tank crews were experiencing similar problems. The shortage of 76mm armor-piercing shells was monstrous. Tanks often went into battle with high-explosive shells, which were rather weak against German tanks of that period. War is always a drama of scarcity. For some, a scarcity of tungsten. For others, a scarcity of steel and explosives for full-fledged shells. Part 3. The Twilight of the Knocker and the Birth of the Queen. Evolution under the pressure of war. By the autumn of 1941, it became clear that the crutch was too fragile. Subcaliber shells for the 37mm gun were like a syringe of adrenaline for a dying man. It could give you a minute, 5, 10. But the disease was systemic, and the disease was called the inadequacy of anti-tank means against the new generation of tanks. The tungsten reserves were melting. The effectiveness of subcaliber shells in the field was lower than the tables said. And Soviet tank crews were learning. They were building up tactics, learning to cooperate with infantry and artillery. There were more of them, and they began to come not in scattered groups, but in entire corps. German industry had to urgently find not a temporary, but a permanent solution. And it came in the form of the formidable, powerful, long-barreled 75mm Pak 40 gun. This was no longer a workhorse, but a true heavy hitter. Its regular armor-piercing shell weighed almost 7 kilograms and at a range of 1,000 meters could pierce armor nearly 100 millimeters thick. This was a weapon that didn't require letting a tank get within pistol shot range. It could punch right through a T-34 in a KV from a kilometer or more. With the mass appearance of the Pak 40 by mid-1942, the fate of the little old 37mm gun was sealed. It was taken out of production, sent to secondary sectors of the front, to occupied territories to fight partisans, where it lived out its days. But the idea of the subcaliber shell did not die. It evolved. They began making it in larger calibers for more powerful guns. It became not a crutch for a weak gun, but an enhancer for a strong one. Subcaliber shells with detachable sabots appeared, which were effective at even greater ranges. This technology is alive today in modern tank ammunition. The lessons of a small shell. Technology versus resources. So what does this story about the small 37mm subcaliber shell tell us? This is not a story about brilliant German weaponry. It is a deep, multi-layered parable about war as a giant machine that grinds up resources. It's a story about how a tactical trick, a technological cleverness, can temporarily turn the tide of a battle. How the skill, courage, and know-how of a crew can compensate for technical weakness. German artillerymen in the summer of '41 performed a daily feat, letting the steel monsters get within a lethally dangerous range to make that one single shot. But it is also a story of strategic defeat. Because war is not won by the one who has the cleverest crutch for one battle. War is won by the economy, the industry, the home front that can produce not thousands, but millions of full-fledged, powerful, reliable shells. That can forge steel, cast armor, and do it in such quantities that all the enemy's temporary advantages simply drown in that flood. The tungsten core of the PZ.GR40 is a symbol of the Wehrmacht's desperation and ingenuity the moment it first encountered something it couldn't break with its usual tactics. But the Soviet response was not in creating a similar crutch. The Soviet response was in ramping up production of the T-34, in creating the Su-76 and Su-157 self-propelled guns, in the avalanche of steel and fire that ultimately broke the back of the strongest army in Europe. So, friends, remember, often history is made not only by giant battles and general staff decisions, but also by such small, shiny nails of desperation. It was a small caliber, but the losses from it in those terrible summer months of '41 were huge. And that makes our victory all the more valuable. If this deep dive struck a chord with you, if you want us to keep breaking down such cool, non-obvious topics of military history, your support is very important to me. Hit that big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We have many more topics ahead about tigers, about Katyushas, about how Soviet and German intelligence worked. And most importantly, write in the comments. Tell me what you think. Could the Germans have won if they had more tungsten? Or was the fate of the war decided not on the battlefield, but the blast furnaces of Magnitogorsk and in the offices of the People's Commissariats? Let's talk. Your opinion is the fuel for our next meetings. Until new, deep topics, friends.